It was contentious, but, we did get cease and desist letters. We called it conversation and discussion. And so we said, hey, we know you sent us a cease and desist. Okay, we'll remove your logo, but hey, why don't we just do a deal? Like we're going to be driving you sales and we can prove it.
Welcome to the Product Market Fit Show, brought to you by Mistral, a seed stage firm based in Canada. I'm Pablo. I'm a founder turned VC. My goal is to help early stage founders like you find product market fit. Today, we have Derrick, the co-founder and CEO of Drop, a mobile app that helps you earn rewards from all types of merchants. Drop is based in Toronto. They have about 100 employees and have raised over $50 million. Derrick, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Hey, Pablo. Great to be on.
The topic of today's episode is how to launch a marketplace. And founders know that launching a marketplace is notoriously hard because you have that, launching any product is hard, but launching a marketplace, you have two sets of customers and you have that classic chicken and egg problem. And you have to think about how do you get one side without getting the other and how do you fake it until you are post-launch and you have flywheel effects and then things start to, hopefully get a little easier. Let's start maybe in the early days, right? As I understand it, you were an EIR at another VC firm and you kind of came up with this idea of a rewards platform. Let's touch on that a little bit, just like how you came up with the idea itself.
Yeah, for sure. As of yesterday was our 5-year anniversary.
Nice,
so
congratulations.
5 years. Thank you. And to your point, it does not mean it gets easier over time. I think the problem that you're really trying to solve evolves and potentially even changes. But I'm a serial entrepreneur. My last company was exited in 2013, I believe. And the buyer called SFX Entertainment, they IPO'd. We moved to New York. The CEO of SFX started Live Nation. So we owned and operated massive music festivals. And I then found myself in New York after selling, thinking a lot about, because the CEO came up to me and said, hey, Derrick, we have hundreds of thousands of young people coming to our music festivals. Tomorrowland was the big one that we owned in Belgium. It's great. But, as you know, part of our business model is sponsorship and we have a ton of big name sponsors. But the challenge is always, okay, the fans are coming to our festivals. When they leave, what happens? And how do we then prove that, hey, you came to our festival, you saw a sponsor's logo, and you actually went in store and started shopping and buying their product. And so we started thinking a lot about shopping data. We started thinking a lot about interacting, engaging with consumers, in those 360 days of the year when they're not at any of our music festivals. And then we just started thinking a lot about loyalty and rewards. And that was 2013, 2014. As a Canadian, we all know Air Miles. We all know, if you walk into one of the few grocery stores, one of the few pharmacies, one of the few gas stations, you'll probably see Air Miles signage. And you probably are, a member of Air Miles. I think something like 1 in 3 Canadians are a member of Air Miles. So this concept of like cross-merchant loyalty rewards, I knew was very big. But I started then playing around with the products and realized like, wow, they're so outdated. They're archaic. You have to swipe a physical card at the checkout. The mobile experience wasn't great. The merchants on the platforms weren't great. So then I just started thinking beyond just music festivals and thought there was something much bigger outside of that. And that was 5 years ago. And fast forward to today, we've become one of the largest mobile rewards platforms in North America.
What were the pieces you needed for launch, right? Like, first of all, on the marketplace side, what were the two sides? Obviously, consumers on one side, I assume merchants on the other. And then what were kind of this, as you thought about MVP, right? Like, what were some of the key things you knew needed to be in there?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Marketplaces are notoriously hard to build, especially like when you think about an Air Miles type of model where you need the merchant, right? Like they have to let you build into their point of sale terminals. We said, okay, well, if this works, we're going directly to the consumer. They put in their banking information. We don't need to do any integrations with merchants. And so instantly the consumer side is a lot easier, the merchant side is a lot easier because we then said to ourselves, hey, could we not fake it till we make it? Could we not just put up logos? Because if the consumer is linking their bank account, we know already where they're shopping. And could we not just say, hey, shop at these places, get points? And, they do, and we see it. without any merchant integration. And so that was like the big secret sauce aha thing kind of realization we had in early days. It's why we've had to raise the amount of money that we've had to essentially.
Was that contentious? Because first of all, you're faking it. And second of all, you are taking those points out of your bank account. Like those points translate to dollars, right? You're effectively just putting that up.
It was contentious, but, we did get cease and desist letters. We called it communication and discussion, whereby we actually reached back out and said, hey, conversation and discussion. And so we said, hey, we know you sent us a cease and desist. Okay, we'll remove your logo, but hey, why don't we just do a deal? Like we're going to be driving you sales and we can prove it. Like, the thinking and strategy really it's pretty simple. It's how do you keep this consumer engaged as much as possible to open up the app as much as possible. And when you really think about it, is having as many relevant offers. So we knew everyone loves Amazon, everyone loves Starbucks, everyone loves, Metro in Canada for grocery. Because we launched Canada first, when we went to US, whatever the relevant US grocery is, and that's it. And then we said, hey, this Wealthsimple and all these other ones are the cherry on top for now, because we just need to get enough users to then go pitch the actual merchants to do actual deals with them, so that they would actually listen, because we can then say, hey, we have users and we have a product that works. And so that was the big focus for, I'd say, the first year or so.
Let me just dive into that cease and desist thing for a second. In one sense, it's kind of the obvious thing to do. It just speeds up the flywheel so much. But how did you think through that, right? Because a lot of founders might look at that and say, like, what if, right? Like, what if they would have, put, not just send the cease and desist letter, but, can they sue you? Like, what can they do? And is that where you want to be stuck at? Like, I think it's 100% the right choice. And when you look at, Uber and Airbnb and the stuff they had to do, what's the thinking? Like, you're talking to a first-time founder right now who has this kind of choice to maybe fake it and go into, let's say, a gray area, right? How do you think through that?
I don't think there's much thinking other than, founders that figure it out. And if you look at, companies like Uber, even Instacart, I met not too long ago the early CFO of Instacart, who they would get like the police called on them because their shoppers are illegally going into like a grocery store without permission, and they would get kicked out of places. And so I feel like it's really just the strength of the vision. Like, I think if there has to be true conviction, 200% conviction to build these types of businesses. And if you don't have that level of conviction, don't do it, because it's going to be hard. And, I think it's why VCs actually like the fact that we were, doing this to get to scale, because a lot of companies maybe wouldn't have gone that far. And
leading up to the launch, right? What are you doing from a go-to-market marketing side? Are you doing anything up until the launch, or are you waiting until you launch and just putting it out there? What are those pre-steps that you're taking?
Yeah, so I'd say having been at this now in startups for almost a decade, I'd say I've been my view of like press and media, has evolved and changed. I'd say even like a lot of consumer companies launching at South by Southwest, it's so noisy. I think the big focus was just consumer value. It was just, hey, and I ran the Facebook ads in the early days, so I actually can talk a bit about what we thought that value was. And the value was, hey, the ads would say things like earn points at McDonald's, Amazon, Starbucks, just like brands that we knew that they would, like, no brainer, that would normally actually not pay out points. Like McDonald's back then didn't have a loyalty program. Amazon still doesn't really have a loyalty program. So, that was the focus. It was like really just focused maniacally on how do we have a no-brainer value prop that we can go to market with? And then we just essentially ran ads against that. Like an ad that looked like an ad and it didn't really work. And then an ad that literally was a photo of a chicken nugget. And people just loved it and they clicked it, they downloaded it, drop. And so they linked their card and they were then seamlessly earning points. So I think that was.
And this
really
was before. This was before the launch or only after? Like, did you get a wait list going or anything like that?
We had a wait list. We did an event. I'd say all that was good hype. That hype though was to help us get merchants, not consumers.
I see. Okay.
To make drop a more real brand company. I remember we would take photos from our like launch parties and whatnot, and just find ways to share them and have like potential, partners that we're pitching, see them, on our LinkedIn or me just casually in conversation, just like, oh yeah, we had a party, take a look, it was cool. So that was really, the point of that's what we did on the merchant side. Because we didn't run any ads on the merchant side. We just tried to make us more real through events and, that type of stuff. And then on the consumer side, just consumer value.
But when it comes to apps and digital products for consumers, do you feel you kind of have to wait till there's a launch in order to like run the ads and see, because maybe you launched it and the CAC was like way higher than you expected. And now shit, what do you do? How do you think through that? Like you did it a certain way. Is that the way you would do it? Or would you today say, you know what, like let's launch ads at the beginning, see what the CAC to conversion might be like, and then just tell them it's coming soon? And
would I have done things differently? Maybe run ads before raising money and then use that. And, maybe we would have raised more money or got a better valuation because we had more data. So maybe that, but I'd say we just had a really good gut. It's like, why would a consumer not want this? And even till to this day, the reason why we're, top 20 in the App Store is because it's such a no-brainer value prop. And the only thing really stopping consumers is really like friction or like, opportunity costs. Like, are there other apps that are better, or really, are they openly giving up, banking data? Because that was a big part, early days of Drop. You had to link your banking credentials to use the app. And so yeah, I'd say like I still think that's the way to think about it. But it depends on the product. And for our product, I think that was the right way to think about it. So I look back, I actually wish we just launched the US right away. I do give founders now advice, if they can launch the US right away, just do it. Because I look back and there was nothing, Canada, US, like we learned there wasn't a big difference in the market. We had that gut. The gut, we should have trusted our gut more and just launched the US first.
Why at the time did you decide to do Canada first, and why might you today just do it all at once?
I think it was a combination of, we were just like thinking about launching the US was very like scary. It's like, oh, this massive market, who knows what'll happen? What if we get sued in the US, will that bring down the company quicker? US is more litigious, like a lot of that stuff. We weren't really sure the regulatory, and then like all of that. And also we just had more relationships and getting offers from our, network in Canada. But when I think about it, looking back, yeah, definitely, should have just launched the US and then, same playbook and yeah, maybe just like not as quickly, like slowed it a little bit. But that was a big learning for me as I look back into the early days.
In a launch, right? What's the hardest parts of a launch? And I think driving traffic, has to be at the top of that pyramid, and driving like quality traffic for an appropriate price, right? Just on social, right? Because I think that's a go-to place. Like today you're launching a consumer product and you're probably thinking, I'm going to run Facebook ads, pay-per-click, IG, whatever, right? 5 years ago, that playbook versus today, how do you feel about it? Has that changed, or it's like, no, that's still the number one way to go for most consumer products?
It's definitely changed, especially, in our categories. It's gotten more crowded. It depends on your stage of company, but early days, focusing on number of installs, cost of installs is important. It shows consumers high level want to use a product, download it, but the average. This is a crazy stat, and I'm pretty sure it still applies. The average number of apps that a consumer downloads a year is 0. They delete just as many apps as they download. So it's gotten a lot more competitive to get consumer attention. There's a lot of apps. So I'd say for founders, I think early days for sure, the focus still should be, top of the funnel growth. But I would advise, like, what is that metric? Is it cost per install? But be thoughtful about that. What is that top line metric? So for Drop, early days, we would say, let's optimize the heck out of installs. But if I were to be really tough on myself or ourselves, I would have said no. Like the focus should be, you've downloaded the app, you've onboarded. If you want to take it a step further, even more, you've downloaded the app, you've onboarded, and you've clicked on an offer. And if you want to take it even a step further, you clicked on the offer and you actually completed it. And if you want to take it even a step further, and this is where now, many years in, this is what we're focused on. It's like you've done all that and you've redeemed for something. So it's like, that is, because if you think about it, like that is ultimately when the consumer really gets value. Like, what does it mean if a consumer's on your app for 20 minutes, or what does it really mean now when they've downloaded an app? Like, there's just so much noise out there that I think founders need to be very thoughtful about what that should be.
The traffic itself, in all likelihood, for a consumer startup in the early days, is coming from paid channels.
we were doing paid, but I'd say these days, I remember when fundraising, and especially at this stage, but I definitely would presume in early stages, investors will still ask, what is your proprietary channel? Like, what is something, in which you can get scale and users in which you're not paying? Because, there's that running joke, 50% of VC dollars go to Facebook ads and Google ads. So it's like everyone,
that's where Clearbank was born.
Exactly. I think everyone does it, but what is that one thing that others may not? And I think for us, it was just like a value prop. I think it was just like really focusing on the value prop. And
did you go pretty heavy on whether affiliate or influencer, or especially like referrals, right, and getting people to invite other people and build in virality from day one, or was that a later thing? How much emphasis did you put on that?
We did that when we launched the US, and looking back, it was double-edged sword, because I think it was a big part in helping us. We charted in the lifestyle category of the App Store to number 2 under Tinder. We've since moved to shopping category where we're continuing to chart, but that helped us raise our round. That got us hundreds of thousands of users a month by leveraging referral, by leveraging a combination of, at the time, Snap Stories was just starting out. And so the costs were low. The engagement was insane of certain Snapchat, influencers. We found a way to them. And so literally over a weekend, we get like 25,000, downloads from one influencer at like $1 CPI. And, how they would promote the product though was, download the Drop app, link a card, do a bunch of stuff that you're going to do anyway, get free points, and hey, you can use my code and you get a $5, credit on your Drop app. So it was great. It drove a lot of top line growth, but then, we bled money. And also a lot of those users just did that and disappeared. Like, they're like, okay, well, this influencer is telling me a thing. I like this influencer. I'm going to do it, and then churn. And so, again, it goes back to stage. It goes back to where you're at as a company. And I think for us, it did help raise our round and it helped show top line growth. But then it sort of, ultimately backfired a bit because, longer term, a lot of those users churned and our cohorts, suffered as a result.
That's just such a classic story in consumer startups that, get crazy virality for whatever reason. And then it all kind of, not all comes crashing down, but it kind of comes way back down once that there's not many left to spread to. But in the early days, right, and thinking fake it till you make it and so on, like what I'm hearing in between the lines is that happened to drop to an extent, and yet it was still, potentially positive, like net positive, right? Like, how do you think about that? You're early founder, and you're like, you have these growth hacks in mind. Do you leverage them in order to grow top line, in order to get to some next milestone, which will then help you, et cetera, or do you watch a lot of the retention and the true value super early on? Like,
if I had perfect information looking back, and for example, knew that there would be a VC that would just keep funding that all day long, funding the business at negative gross margin as long as we keep growing, then sure, like we would not have made some of those tough choices. But we made them because, now it's like 2019, and, to fundraise, there was a big focus on unit economics and payback and all of that. And I think, it didn't have to be fully solved, but we needed a story. And as we were operating at, in a very unideal state around gross margins and whatnot, we just said to ourselves, hey, this is just the right thing to do, because we can't this business isn't sustainable because we're just burning through investor money and not, doing deals with merchants and partners and have them pay. So I'd say there's no playbook for sure. And the macro climate for sure was part of our decision making around some of these things.
When you look at something like B2B SaaS, on the other hand, the classic playbook is, if you can worry about, you have growth on one side, you have retention on the other. How do you get to $100 million in ARR? Do you worry about growth first and then solve retention, or retention first and then solve growth? And it's kind of the standard answer that you should solve retention first. Make sure you don't have a leaky bucket. Make sure you really understand who gets true value and why. And then you can always figure out top line and start dialing for dollars and scale that side of the business later. What I'm not sure about, and maybe it's bigger question mark in consumer, and that's what I'm trying to drive at, is that even true in consumer? Because consumer, you kind of need to get above the noise. Like, you do need to be hot, right? Like, you got to be top 2 or top 3 in order to really drive, momentum. And maybe you got to get there in ways that aren't so scalable and you fix it later. So how do you think through that?
100%. You're correct when you say that. I'd say, The challenge with marketplaces, and so I actually, when I talk about drop in marketplaces, I actually think it's a three-sided marketplace. There's consumer merchants, and then there's drop. Like drop has to benefit. Drop, it's important for us to have value too. And I'd say early days it was very consumer focused, and then it was, hey, if we want drop to be around, like our business model has to make sense. And then so we then focused on that. And the challenge is that like it's very hard to keep everyone happy. Like in early days, consumers were winning because they were getting a ton of value. Merchants, for those who, were on drop, there was no fee, there was no setup fee. It was like a no-brainer. It's like, yeah, I'd love to be on drop, and you're going to drive me sales, and I'm going to pay you only when you drive me sales. So they won, but then drop wasn't winning because we're just burning through, money at non-ideal, financial profile. And then we said, okay, we think the consumer side is now there. We think we have enough to then sell the merchants. Let's focus on us. And so for us, that was a focus on, what metrics do we need to raise our next round and to be sustainable? Gross margins, unit economics, retention. And then we shifted that. And then in later rounds, the big focus was, okay, well, it looks like consumers are using your product. It looks like you're in a much better spot now on the actual business. Hey, can you show that these merchants are not only retained, but they are increasing their budgets with you? They view you as a, like must have versus a good to have. And so then the shift becomes, that. And so I feel like there's like multi-sided, things to focus on. And I think it's a matter of just knowing some of it's gut. I think for us, as you said, like, if we launched drop today, would it be as buzzworthy? Probably not. But was that important to get the buzz when we first launched, to get, investor money, to get merchants to be aware of? Yeah. So then we said, okay, well, let's focus on that side of the marketplace first.
How many installs, like where did you get to when then you went out and raised that seed round?
I think tens of thousands of installs. And then we did the seed round, and then hundreds of thousands when we did the Series A.
Did you notice any meaningful differences, in the US versus, obviously you had more learnings, but US versus Canada launch?
Everything was better. Like consumers were more engaged. It was cheaper to acquire. They were, more retentive on the product. Like everything was just better. And that's where I look. And we actually, I think, got less cease and desist letters. A lot of the VCs who passed on our seed round was because we weren't in the US yet as well. So I'm like, hey, if we just had launched in the US, would we have, raised a more competitive seed round or so I do think that was a big learning looking backwards. So,
all right. So look, we'll stop there. Maybe just to recap quickly, you had this idea for a rewards platform. You found a way to make it just a crystal clear, very compelling value prop. And that's at the heart of all this, because with a weak value prop, CAC gets more expensive, installs don't happen. You really need that in there. And with that, you raised the pre-seed, you launched in Canada first, you got to a meaningful number of installs at a very reasonable CAC. You put in some kind of referral-based components to the app. You worked with influencers to really grow it, to launch in the US, and you kind of got to a place where you felt there was PMF, even if you can want to call it fake PMF because you were giving out money, but it was nonetheless still PMF with a clear path towards fixing whatever issues you had at the time. And now, when you've continued to grow, as you mentioned early on, you're in the top of the App Store in the shopping category, which is awesome. So look, Derrick, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you sharing all of that with us.
Great. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much for listening all the way through. It's been a pleasure having you here. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.